Mind buried for a reason, and tonight you're about to dig them back up. Not memories, not dreams, not imagination. Something else. Something that was there before you had the words to describe it, before you had the strength to fight it, before you even understood what fear really was. And the worst part? It understood you. Every child carries shadows in their memory, flickers of something just slightly wrong, a face that didn't belong, a voice that shouldn't have been there, a moment that never made sense but never fully disappeared either. Most people grow up and forget, but you didn't click on this by accident. Because somewhere deep inside, there's a memory you never fully let go of. A hallway that felt too long, a room that felt watched, a silence that wasn't empty, but waiting. Tonight, I'm not just going to tell you 3 disturbing childhood stories. I'm going to show you something much deeper, something hidden beneath them. A pattern, a system, a presence. Because what if those childhood fears weren't random? What if they were the earliest signs that something was already studying you? Children see what adults are trained to ignore. Their minds haven't been conditioned yet. Their perception hasn't been filtered, controlled, dulled. That's why the things they see are often the things we're not supposed to. And if you listen closely, really closely, you might start to realize something uncomfortable. Those memories you buried, they never actually left. They've just been waiting. Waiting for the moment you were ready to face them. Waiting for right now. Because once you remember, you don't go back to who you were before. So don't treat this like entertainment. Don't treat this like a story. Treat this like a door. And understand something before we go any further. Not everyone who opens this door comes back the same. Now listen carefully, because the first memory is already starting to move. You were taught that old houses make noise. Wood expands, pipes shift, wind slips through cracks you can't see. That's what they told you, because it was easier than telling the truth. Because the truth doesn't comfort a child. The truth creates one. This memory begins the same way most of them do. Ordinary, almost forgettable. A small house, quiet street, a life so normal it feels like nothing could ever break through it. But that's always the illusion, because the places that look the safest are often the ones where something has already settled in. A child lies awake at night, staring at a ceiling dotted with glowing stars, the kind meant to make darkness feel smaller. But darkness doesn't shrink, it adapts. The shadows on the wall begin as nothing more than branches swaying in the wind, predictable, rhythmic, safe, until one of them isn't. It doesn't move with the others. It doesn't follow the rules. And deep down, the child already knows that. Because the human brain, even at 9 years old, recognizes patterns instantly. So when something breaks that pattern, fear isn't learned, it's activated. The shadow sits low in the corner, near the toy chest, still, watching. And here's what matters. The child doesn't scream, doesn't run, doesn't even fully react, because something older than logic takes over. Freeze, observe, don't let it know you see it. That instinct didn't come from nowhere. And then, just like that, it's gone. No sound, no movement, just absence. But absence doesn't mean nothing was there. It means something chose to leave, and that's worse. The next morning, the toy chest is open. That's how it starts. Not with something impossible, but with something small enough to dismiss. A detail, a crack in reality just wide enough to ignore. Until it isn't. Because weeks later, the second witness speaks, and this is where it stops being a coincidence. A 5-year-old girl, standing casually, says something that should never come out of a child's mouth so easily. There's a man in the closet. No fear, no hesitation, just fact. And that's what should terrify you the most. Because children don't lie like that. Not about things they don't understand. Not with that kind of certainty. But the adults? They do what adults always do. They explain it away. They dismiss. They protect themselves from the truth by calling it imagination. Because accepting it would mean admitting something much worse. That whatever was in that house wasn't just being seen. It was choosing who could see it and why. And now the question isn't whether it was real. The question is why it revealed itself to them at all.
Once something reveals itself, it doesn't go back into hiding. Not completely. Because now it knows you've noticed. And that changes the rules. The nights don't become louder at first. They become more precise, targeted. The kind of quiet that feels engineered, like something is carefully controlling how much of itself you're allowed to experience at a time. That's how it keeps you from breaking too early. That's how it keeps you there. The child begins to wake up at odd hours, not fully, not suddenly, but slowly, like being pulled out of sleep by something that doesn't need to make noise to get your attention. And then it comes. Not a voice, not a figure, a sound. Dragging, slow, deliberate, across the floor. Not random movement, not the creak of wood or the settling of an old house. This has direction, intention. It starts somewhere in the room, and it's coming closer. You don't need to see something to understand what it's doing, because your body already knows. Every nerve locks in place, breathing becomes shallow, muscles freeze, not out of choice, but out of something deeper. Because again, that instinct returns. Don't move, don't acknowledge it, don't let it know you're awake. The sound reaches the side of the bed and stops right there, close enough that if the child just leaned over just a little, they would see whatever made it. But they don't. They can't. Because some part of them understands something adults forget. Seeing it makes it real in a way you can't undo. So they stay frozen, clutching the blanket like it's protection, even though deep down they know it isn't. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Sleep takes over. But not because it's safe, because the body can't stay in that state forever. And when morning comes, reality tries to repair itself again. But it fails, because this time it left evidence. Long, fresh scratches carved into the floor, right beside the bed. Not random marks, not accidental damage, intentional, placed exactly where the sound ended, like a signature, like something wanted to make sure this wasn't dismissed again. So the child does what children are supposed to do. They go to the adult. They show them. They look for protection, for explanation, for someone to step in and say, I see it too. But that's not what happens. Instead, the response is anger, dismissal, blame. You must have done this. And right there, something shifts inside the child. Because now it's not just the thing in the room they're dealing with, it's isolation. The realization that whatever this is, they're facing it alone. And that's exactly where it wants them. Because fear shared is weaker, but fear carried alone, that's where it grows, that's where it spreads, that's where it becomes something much more useful to whatever's watching from the dark.
Isolation is not a side effect, it's part of the design. Because once a child realizes no one is coming to validate what they're experiencing, something inside them begins to fracture. Not loudly, not all at once, quietly, like a crack forming beneath the surface of glass. And whatever is in that house, it feels that. It understands that moment better than the child does, because now it has space to move. The nights begin to change again. Not louder, not more obvious, just closer. The sounds don't stay across the room anymore. They don't linger in corners or hide behind excuses like old wood or wind. They come from one place now, the closet. Always the closet. Think about that. A space designed to hold things you don't want to see. A door you can shut and pretend doesn't exist. And behind that door, something begins to speak. Not clearly, not in words you can repeat, but in whispers, low, broken, just enough to feel like language without ever becoming it. Like a voice that isn't meant to be understood, only felt. The child lies there, listening, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince themselves it's nothing. But the human brain doesn't ignore patterns like that. It tries to decode them, and that's exactly what makes it worse. Because once you start listening, you start focusing. And once you focus, you start connecting. The whispers don't stop. They become a constant undercurrent in the night, like a radio just barely out of tune, always there, always just out of reach. And then something else happens. The second witness breaks again, the little sister, crying, pointing, not at the closet this time, at the corner. He's there, simple, direct, no confusion, no imagination in her voice, just recognition. And here's what matters. She's not asking if something is there. She's telling you it is. That difference changes everything, because fear asks questions, but certainty comes from experience. Now there are two minds, two perspectives, seeing the same pattern from different angles. And still, the adult world refuses to engage. No checking the closet, no searching the corners, just prayers whispered into the air, like that's enough to erase something already inside the walls. But prayer doesn't remove presence, it acknowledges it. And whatever is in that house, it hears that too. It feels the shift, because now it's not just interacting with the children, it's influencing the environment around them. The tension thickens, the silence stretches longer, the air feels heavier, like something is building. And then comes the night where everything crosses a line. The door, left open when it was always closed. That's not random, that's not forgetfulness, that's invitation. The hallway light flickers, then dies, and suddenly the boundary between spaces disappears. The room isn't separate anymore. The dark is connected now. And then, footsteps, slow, measured, coming down the hall, not rushing, not hiding, approaching like it knows exactly where it's going. And when they stop, right outside the door, you already know something has changed, because this time, it's not staying in the shadows. This time, it's coming in.
There's a moment right before something enters your space where time stretches, not in seconds, in awareness. Your body knows what your mind refuses to accept, that something is about to cross a line it shouldn't be able to cross. And once it does, there is no going back to normal. The footsteps stop at the door, not pacing, not hesitating, just waiting. As if it understands the weight of that threshold better than you do, because doors aren't just wood and hinges. They're boundaries, agreements, lines we draw between what belongs and what doesn't. And something standing on the other side of that door is about to ignore that line completely. The handle doesn't turn fast, it doesn't slam open, That would be too easy, too obvious. Instead, it creaks, slow, controlled, like whatever is there wants you to hear every inch of it, wants you to feel it happening. The door opens just enough, not wide, just enough for something to look in, and that's when the child sees it. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. A shape, tall, wrong, not defined by features, but by absence, like darkness decided to take form just for a moment, just to be seen, just to be remembered. It doesn't rush in, it doesn't attack, it leans, its head entering the room slightly, as if observing, studying, confirming something. And here's what matters most. It doesn't need to come closer, because proximity isn't what gives it power. Recognition is. The child shuts their eyes instantly, not out of denial, but instinct, because somewhere deep inside, they understand a rule they were never taught. If you don't fully see it, maybe it won't fully see you. So they pretend. They lie still. They force their breathing into the rhythm of sleep. They become invisible, or at least try to. And after a moment, the presence withdraws. The door closes. Silence returns. But silence isn't peace. Silence is confirmation. Because now the question is no longer, is something there? That question is dead. Now it's something far worse. It knows where you are. Morning comes, like it always does. Light floods the room like nothing ever happened. But light doesn't erase memory. It only hides what's willing to wait. The child asks their mother if she came into the room that night. A simple question, one that should have a simple answer. But the answer is no, flat, certain, unshaken. And that's when reality splits completely. Because now there is no explanation left, no excuse, no safe interpretation, only truth. Something opened that door. Something stood there. Something looked in. And it wasn't supposed to exist. But the story doesn't end there, because something else happens next. Something that changes everything. The mother hesitates, just slightly, just enough to reveal something she wasn't ready to say before. Because adults don't just dismiss out of ignorance. Sometimes they dismiss because they already know, and they're trying to protect themselves from saying it out loud. But silence has limits, and eventually, even the ones who pretend not to see start remembering what they felt too.
Adults don't ignore fear because they're blind. They ignore it because they've already seen enough. That hesitation, that brief pause before the mother answers, it isn't confusion, it's recognition, a crack in the mask. Because deep down, she knows something in that house doesn't belong to them, and she's been pretending it does, for their sake, for her own sanity. But denial has a cost, and that cost is always paid in silence. The children speak again, together this time, not separately, not as isolated incidents that can be dismissed or explained away. Unified, consistent, aligned. There is something here. We've seen it. We've heard it. It's not imagination. And for the first time, the mother listens. Not fully, not openly, but enough to act. She walks through the house that night with a candle in her hand. Think about that. Not a flashlight, not something modern, logical, grounded. A flame, something ancient, symbolic, a ritual, whether she admits it or not. She moves from room to room, whispering prayers into spaces that have already been occupied by something else. But here's the truth most people don't understand. You don't cleanse a place by acknowledging it. You reveal that you know it's there. And whatever has been watching, listening, waiting, it notices that shift immediately. Because now the game changes again. For a while, things go quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, no dragging sounds across the floor, just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels like relief, but isn't, because it's not absence, it's patience. And patience is far more dangerous, because something that waits is something that plans. Days pass, maybe weeks, and slowly the house starts to feel almost normal again. Enough for doubt to creep back in. Enough for the mind to begin rewriting what happened. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was just a phase. That's how it regains control, not through fear, but through forgetting. And then it reminds you. Not at night, not in the dark, but in the middle of the day, when the sun is out, when safety is supposed to be unquestioned. A child sits alone in the house, quiet, unaware that something has been waiting for exactly this moment. And then it happens. A sound from down the hallway, sharp, sudden, final. The toy chest slams shut, not creaks, not shifts, slams, with force, with intent, with presence. And here's why that moment matters more than anything before it, because darkness doesn't need darkness anymore. Whatever is in that house doesn't belong to the night, it belongs to the space itself. The child walks slowly toward the room, every step heavier than the last, every instinct screaming to stop, to turn back, to leave. But curiosity is stronger than fear. The door is open. The room is still, the toy chest is closed, but everything else is wrong. Toys scattered, thrown, not dropped, not knocked over, deliberately spread across the floor like something went through them, searching, selecting, deciding. And in that moment, the child understands something no one ever taught them. This isn't random. This isn't chaos. This is interaction. Something is responding. Something is engaging. Something is treating that room like it belongs to it. And the most dangerous realization begins to form. It was never hiding. It was never passing through. It's been living there, watching, learning, waiting, for them to finally understand that they were never alone.
By the time you realize something has been there all along, it's already too late to call it a coincidence. Because patterns don't lie. And this one is becoming impossible to ignore. The house doesn't feel like a home anymore. It feels occupied. Not in a way you can explain to someone else, but in a way your body refuses to ignore. Every room carries weight. Every corner feels like it's holding something just outside your vision. And the silence, it's no longer empty. It's aware. The child stops feeling safe even during the day. That's how deep it's rooted itself. Because once fear crosses into daylight, it's no longer tied to imagination. It becomes part of reality. And then comes the moment that changes everything. Not for the child, for the mother. Years pass before she finally says it out loud. But when she does, it confirms what was always there beneath the surface. She admits it, not dramatically, not in detail, just enough. She says that sometimes she would wake up at night and see a shadow standing in her doorway, watching, silent, still. The same pattern, the same presence, the same behavior. And here's the truth that should settle into your chest right now. It wasn't targeting the children, it was studying the family, learning their routines, understanding their reactions, choosing when to appear and who to reveal itself to. Because this wasn't chaos, this was controlled exposure. The children saw more because they could. The mother saw less because she resisted. But she still saw enough to know something was wrong. And she never told them. Not because it wasn't real, but because saying it out loud would make it permanent, would give it form,
would confirm that whatever was in that house wasn't bound by walls or doors or logic. It chose when to be seen. It chose how to be remembered. And most importantly, it chose to stay, even after they left. That's the part people don't like to think about. We assume these things are tied to places, to houses, to locations we can walk away from. But what if they're not? What if the house wasn't the source, just the beginning? Because years later, when the child grows up, when the distance should have erased everything, something small still remains. Not a shadow, not a figure, a sound. Faint, familiar, almost forgotten. The slow, deliberate drag of something moving across a floor. Not in the house, not in that room, but in memory. And memory is a place you never truly leave. That's the first story. But understand this before we go further. That wasn't just a haunting. That was a pattern being introduced, a system revealing itself in pieces. Because the second memory doesn't start in an old house. It starts somewhere newer, cleaner, safer. Or at least, that's what it wants you to believe.
People like to believe that leaving a place means leaving everything behind, that distance erases presence, that walls contain what happens inside them. But that belief is built on comfort, not truth. Because the real question was never whether the house was haunted. The real question is this: why did it choose them? Years later, when the memory is no longer fresh, when childhood has been buried under routines, responsibilities, and the illusion of control, something still lingers. Not visibly, not physically, but internally, like a scar that never quite healed. The child grows up, becomes someone who can rationalize things, explain them away, file them under just a weird experience. That's what the world teaches you to do: normalize, dismiss, move forward. But memory doesn't work like that. Because real fear, the kind that rewires you, doesn't fade. It embeds. And every once in a while, it reminds you it's still there. Late at night, in silence, when there are no distractions left to protect you, that's when it comes back. Not as a full image, not as a figure standing in the doorway, just a sound, faint, precise, unmistakable. The slow, deliberate dragging of something moving across a floor. And here's what matters. There is nothing there. No object, no source, no explanation. Just the sound. And the feeling that comes with it. That same cold, internal cold, the kind that doesn't touch your skin, but settles deep inside your chest. The same instinct returning. Don't move. Don't react. Don't acknowledge it. Because some part of you still believes the same rule you followed as a child. If you don't engage, maybe it won't either. But that rule was never about protection. It was about conditioning. Because whatever that presence was, it didn't need to stay in the house. It didn't need to follow physically. It only needed one thing: to be remembered. Because memory is access. Memory is a doorway that never fully closes. And every time you revisit it, every time you feel it again, you reopen that door. You give it space. You give it form. You give it life. That's why it never needed to chase, never needed to attach, never needed to reveal everything at once. It planted itself early, when the mind was still open, still unguarded, still capable of seeing what adults are trained to ignore. And once it was there, it stayed, quiet, patient, dormant, waiting for the moment you'd return to it, like you are right now. So understand this clearly. That first story was never just about a house. It was about introduction.
exposure, the first layer of something much deeper. Because what comes next doesn't just repeat the pattern, it evolves it. A new house, a new family dynamic, a new environment designed to feel safer, but the same underlying presence. And this time, it doesn't stay hidden in corners or closets. This time, it finds a way inside.